It was the dead of winter and bitterly cold. Eddie and Jimmy came up with an idea. Everybody goes camping in the summertime, but how many people go camping in the winter? Not many. Only rugged individuals, real he-men like Eddie and Jimmy would dare to attempt it. So they threw together their gear and headed up the side of the mountain. Their destination was known as the Devil's Tea Table, a giant sandstone feature that rose above the ridgeline after the surrounding stone had eroded. It was famous for the rattlesnakes that crawled around it during the dog days of summer, but there'd be no snakes in January. Perfect. As Eddie and Jimmy trudged up the mountainside under their load of gear, they were followed by their 3 faithful dogs, Caspian, Glory, and Fang. Caspian, the largest of the 3, was an enormous dog that looked like a mangy cross between a wolf and a German shepherd. He was a noble beast, though, who submitted without complaint to being dosed with Happy Jack, a foul-smelling treatment for mange. It had halfway worked. Glory was a happy soul, a yellow beagle mix that loved to hunt. She followed the boys everywhere with a cheerful dog smile on her face, ready for whatever came. Fang was another story. The boy's grandmother owned a petite, long-haired Chihuahua named Princess. When Princess gave birth, the boy's grandmother insisted on giving one of the tiny puppies to her grandsons. The puppy, a big-eyed, big-eared trinket suitable for the lap of some society matron, was met with derision when she first set foot on the hill. "What in the world is that?" cried the boys. "Get a fly swatter and kill it," they said. The pup just stood her ground and stared at the boys as if to say, "You talking to me?" After a few minutes, Eddie said, "Well, it can't be helped. That puppy's not to blame for her genetics, but if she's going to stay on this hill, she needs a name to make up for her size." In the end, the boys settled on the name Fang. It didn't take the boys long to realize that they'd chosen a good name. Ounce for ounce, Fang was the toughest dog on the hill. She was the epitome of the old hillbilly saying, "It ain't the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." Fang would bully the other dogs away from the food dish so she could eat first. She would chase strangers off the hill. She barked furiously at the family cow, nipping at its heels as it ran for its life. Now, when Eddie and Jimmy reached the ridge, the sun was going down. A cold day was turning into a frigid night. They rolled their sleeping bags out on the relatively flat slab of the tea table and lit a small fire. They cooked a couple of weenies, heated some beans, then they turned in for the night. Now that slab of stone wasn't only hard as a rock, it was ice cold. After a miserable hour, Eddie turned to Jimmy and said, "You sleepin'?" "Nope," said Jimmy. "Want to zip our bags together so we can trap some heat?" That's what they did. Problem was, there wasn't much heat to trap, and the cold kept getting colder. They tossed and turned and turned and tossed. They stared up through the bare branches at an amazing star-filled sky. At one point, a large meteor flared noiselessly across the sky so close the boys felt they could have been singed, but it didn't get them any warmer. At last, Eddie came up with an idea. "Hey, Jimmy, what do you say we put those dogs in here?" By that point, Jimmy was ready for anything. And so were the dogs. They didn't need to be invited twice, and in no time were curled around the boys' feet, sleeping like dogs. In the morning, Eddie and Jimmy climbed stiffly out of their sleeping bags, followed by the hounds. Fang's eyes sparkled, and she looked like she would crow if she were a rooster. Glory glanced around with her happy smile as if to ask, "Now what?" Jack just flopped his mangy rear down and had a thorough morning scratch, thumping the ground with pleasure. Eddie and Jimmy looked at the dogs and just shook their heads. They decided to skip breakfast. They just wanted to get down the hill and into a warm house as soon as possible. When they walked in the door, they were greeted by their brothers. "Hey, guys," they said. "How'd you sleep?" Without even attempting a smile, they answered, "We didn't, but we spent the night on the devil's tea table."